Hello everyone! So the full details of the banners for the first half of patch 5.5 were revealed, and boy was I not expecting this good of a banner. Both 5 stars are pretty good, but the 4-star lineup of Iansan, Chevreuse, and Gaming is extremely strong in terms of both meta and versatility. And to be honest, this may be one of the best limited character banner lineups we've had in the entirety of Genshin's lifespan, and I've been playing since its launch. So I wanted to quickly go over all of the characters you can get and explain why you should probably pull on this banner to improve your account. The new 5-star character that you can pull on this banner is Varesa. I've already made a comprehensive guide on Varesa's best builds, teams, and my analysis on her state in the meta on my channel, so I highly suggest checking that video out for a more detailed explanation on Varesa. But just to quickly summarize my thoughts on her, she's a very strong plunge-oriented DPS with a fairly unique playstyle. She is a DPS from natlan, so her power level is looking to be a bit higher compared to older DPSs, following the trend of increasing power creep with natlan characters. Based on early calcs, she's looking to be a top meta DPS, making her arguably the next best electro DPS in the game. She moves around a lot in combat, so Iansan is her best electro support, so it's great that Iansan is also on the banner. One of her best team archetypes is Xianyun based plunge teams, with Varesa being the best looking final support option. While this team can be her best team at high investment, her best team overall is looking to be Chevreuse Overload, and Chevreuse is coincidentally also on the banner. So if you're looking for a solid new DPS, Varesa is a great pull since you'll likely pull Iansan and Chevreuse along the way. So you're pretty much pulling an entire team with her, and it happens to be one of, if not her best overall team in terms of damage, which is especially great for newer players looking for a solid DPS. The best last slot for this team is Mawika, but Bennett, Shangling, and Pyro Traveler are all good alternatives. In terms of constellations, her C1 is an okay damage increase, but her C2 is pretty good. I mentioned Xianyun plunge teams as one of the better team options for Varesa, and she's the other limited 5-star character you can pull as a premier plunge support who allows anyone to jump and plunge while buffing plunge damage, as well as being a solid team healer. For Varesa specifically, Xianyun is still one of her best support options. However, even though Xianyun is a plunge support and Varesa is a plunge DPS, Varesa doesn't need Xianyun to deal a lot of damage. The main reason for this is because Xianyun's plunge buff on her A4 really benefits characters who can trigger reactions to amplify the buff or have innately lower multipliers on their attacks. Varesa doesn't fall into either of these categories, so she doesn't take full advantage of Xianyun's damage buffs. The characters that do really take advantage of Xianyun's plunge buff are Xiao, Hu Tao, Diluc, and Gaming. Xiao likes Xianyun because his multipliers are quite low, but he just gains a lot of damage percent with his burst, so he likes the extra plunge damage. Hu Tao plays well in Vape Plunge with double Hydro, and the Vape damage will amplify Xianyun's plunge buff. And the same thing goes for Diluc and Gaming plunge teams, though they can either do Vape Plunge with Varesa or Melt Plunge with Sitlali, both being very solid teams enabled by Xianyun's supportive capabilities. While you could pull Xianyun just for her team healing for double Hydro Varesa teams for instance, I would really only recommend getting Xianyun if you want to empower units that benefit from the plunge playstyle. Varesa, Xiao, Hu Tao, Diluc, and Gaming are the 5 characters that do like Xianyun as a support, with Xiao, Diluc, and Gaming specifically really wanting Xianyun to enable their best teams. Varesa and Hu Tao both have solid alternatives other than Xianyun, so they don't necessarily need her. In terms of her early constellations, her C1 is pretty much only an exploration buff, but her C2 is pretty good as it buffs the damage increase she provides to plunge attacks. Now let's talk about the 4 stars, starting with Iansan, who is the new 4-star character releasing in patch 5.5. Like Varesa, I have already made a comprehensive guide on Iansan's best builds, teams, and my analysis on her state in the meta on my channel, so I highly suggest checking that video out for a more in-depth explanation on her. To summarize, Iansan is effectively our first Bennett alternative, making her an incredible support to have and arguably one of the best supports in the game. She primarily buffs attack and enables 4P scroll, but instead of being limited to a circle, characters need to move a lot to maximize Iansan's buffs. Most characters aren't looking to do this, and in these cases, her buffs are looking to be overall weaker than Bennett. However, she'll still be a good option for them, and you can get the quality of life of not being restricted to a circle. To the characters that do move around a lot, they can take full advantage of Iansan's buffs, and in these teams, Iansan can buff a DPS even more than Bennett if you have her constellations. Speaking of constellations, while Iansan is fine at C0, she really wants C1 to reduce her ER requirements, C2 for an extra attack buff, and for characters that move around a lot, C6 gives an additional damage bonus buff. I think C2 is the best breakpoint to hit if you're considering to pull in this banner for her. C6 is only a luxury if you get lucky or plan to get constellations of either Varesa or Xianyun. Next, we have Chevreuse, which I did not expect to return so soon since she was recently on the Arlecchino and Cloran rerun banners 2 patches ago. She can be considered one of the best 4-stars in the game since she enables a top meta team archetype for Pyro and Electro DPS's, Chevreuse Overload. As long as the team only contains Pyro and Electro characters, their damage will get buffed as enemies' Pyro and Electro resistances will be shredded when Overload is triggered. She also provides an attack buff and pretty good healing as well. All you need is a C0 Chevreuse in order to start playing the team, but if you manage to get her C6 for even more buffs for Pyro and Electro characters, Chevreuse Overload teams start to become one of the best teams in the game for a lot of strong DPSs. Lastly, we have Gaming. While I do consider him the least valuable 4-star in this banner as a main DPS, if you have the right supports for him and some of his constellations, he's actually a really good carry. His main 2 teams are Farina Vape Plunge and Sitlali Melt Plunge, both with Xianyun, with Iansan potentially being able to replace Xianyun in both teams. With his burst allowing him to get resets on his skill, he can get some pretty big damage numbers by vaping or melting each of his plunges. His damage can actually compete with 5-star DPSs, but his gameplay of catching Mount Chai to get his skill resets, along with timing his plunges to get the correct reactions, can make his overall gameplay quite uncomfortable, so you really need to optimize your play in order to get the most out of Gaming. Constellation wise, C4 is important because he needs energy to use his burst every rotation, and C6 gives him a lot of crit for a significant damage boost. So why do I think this character banner is one of the best ones ever released in Genshin? While Varesa and Xianyun are both great 5-star limited characters, I think the featured 4-stars give a banner most of its value, as you can save up pulls to guarantee the 5-star you want, but the majority of your pulls will be getting you 4-stars. A lot of 4-stars are not the strongest characters, so many banners don't have the best value of 4-star characters. However, this banner has some amazing 4-stars. Gaming can be a very strong DPS, but admittedly can be ignored if you don't care about building him. But both Iansan and Chevreuse are top tier 4-star supports that enable some of the best team comps in the game, and while they both work at C0, they do gain significant buffs with Constellation, so pulling more copies of them will be valuable for any account. Most banners typically don't have great 4-star lineups. There are a few cases where the 4-stars on the banner are valuable, like in Albedo's release banner in patch 1.2, which had Fischl, Sucrose, and Bennett, and in hindsight this was an amazing banner given the time. But in more recent times, a good 4-star lineup happens less often because the 4-star character pool is slowly increasing. Probably the last good 4-star lineup we had was in Arlecchino and Cloran's rerun banner, which had Lanyan, Chevreuse, and Rosaria. With the Varesa and Xianyun banners, there are 2 top meta 4-stars in Iansan and Chevreuse, and 1 strong 4-star DPS in Gaming if you're willing to invest in him. And unlike a lot of other meta 4-stars like Bennett, all of these 4-stars are relatively newer release characters, meaning that most people haven't had the chance to pull that many copies of them. This makes the value of this banner even higher. If you were already planning on pulling for Varesa and Xianyun, then you're eating good. But even if you aren't interested in either of the 5-stars, I do think that it's a good decision for your account to spend pulls on this banner. Now there are some exceptions to this. If you have your guaranteed 50-50 saved up, or you're close to the 5-star pity and you are waiting for another 5-star you want in the future, then you definitely shouldn't pull and waste your pity. But if you are low in your 5-star pity and still have to overcome the 50-50, it's likely going to be advantageous for you to spend a couple rolls to see if you can get some copies of the 4-star characters. For instance, let's say you are at fresh pity and want to pull on Shilonen, who is rerunning in the second half of this patch. We have data from HOYOMiX of the 4-star characters that are going to be on our banner. Assuming this is correct, and it usually is, unless you want Faruzan for an Animo main DPS, you're not going to get that much value from the 4-stars of this banner. So it would likely be better for your account to spend, let's just say, 40 to 50 pulls on Varesa and Xianyun's banner to potentially get some copies of Iansan and Chevreuse. Now you could get Varesa or Xianyun in these early pulls and you may not want them, but getting an early 5-star is a rare occurrence, and in addition, an early 5-star is still an early 5-star. So while this is a calculated risk, in my opinion, pulling 4-stars in this way and building pity is an effective way to get valuable and meta 4-stars that can greatly improve your account, compared to just pulling on banners with the 5-stars you want where you may not necessarily get the best 4-stars for your roster. With Iansan and Chevreuse on the Varesa and Xianyun banners, this is a great time to consider pulling just for the 4-stars. Finally, let's quickly cover the weapon banner. Varesa's signature is a great weapon on her as it gives a lot of crit damage and additional attack for her plunge attacks. Compared to just pulling her C1, her signature will increase her damage more. This weapon is pretty much just for Varesa, but you could use it for other non-meta catalyst plunge DPS builds like Xianyun main DPS. Speaking of Xianyun, her signature is her best weapon option for her, allowing her to buff her team's plunge damage even further, giving her energy for her burst, and gives a lot of attack to increase her plunge buff. Realistically, you should only pull this weapon if you want to vertically invest in Xianyun lane and make her team stronger. For the 4-star weapons, we have a very unique lineup, as all of them are the newly released gacha weapons from Natlan. And while this is pretty cool since you're likely to get new weapons, the weapons themselves are a mixed bag. Fruitful Hook is specifically for Plunge Claymore, so it's a great option for Gaming and Diluc. Flower Wreath Feathers is a fine stat stick for bow users, especially those who charge attack like Linny and Chaska. Wave Riding Whirl can be a decent choice for Kokomi and Barbara. Sturdy Bone can be useful for sword characters that deal normal attack damage like Floran and Ayato, and Mountain Bracing Bolt can synergize well with Emily and potentially Escoffier, who is releasing in patch 5.6. But while some of these weapons are good 4-star options for some characters, I don't think they make the weapon banner that good in terms of value. These are all specifically gacha weapons that you can only get from the weapon banner, so you can only get additional copies in the future when they rerun. But more importantly, all these weapons are just DPS weapons, and DPS weapons typically have other alternatives that are either more accessible or better. For instance, both the Natlan Claymore and bow can be pretty good weapons, but weapons like Serpent Spine and the Fontaine craftable bow exist, and both of them are also good choices, and it's not like the gacha weapons massively outperform the other 4-star options. And if you have 5-star DPS weapons that can serve as big stat sticks, they will likely provide more damage. So while the Natlan gacha weapons can be useful, they aren't going to give as much value to an account like amazing 4-star support weapons like Favonius or Xiphos. So like most weapon banners, you should really only pull on it if you're interested in the 5-star signature weapons. And that's everything I wanted to discuss about these banners. If you thought this was helpful or insightful, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Feel free to leave any questions in the comments below, and for those of you planning on pulling, I wish you all the best of luck on your wishes.